Well, hello there, owlets and Venus lovers, or however you identify as you follow me. I am recording this on July the 2nd, just before the Capricorn full moon. And we're going to look at the Cancer new moon that is on July the 17th. But holy heck, what does this new moon launch? This is just the last part of July, from the 17th, which is when the new moon is, to the end of July, is just going to be the biggest period of head spinning transformation I've ever seen condensed in one place, to be quite honest. And I'm a Venus retrograde fan, or a Venus fan, basically, and that I am running my Venus retrograde heroine's journey class for the 5th time. And the more I look at the astrology of this time, and the more I pay attention to what's coming around me, the more I realize just how transformational this period is. So I am going to quickly share, while I talk a second, I'm actually going to share a QR code that you can just hold your phone up to and scan if you want to check out the class, if you haven't already, and just put your phone camera on it and open up the thing and consider registering, because this class is going to be way deeper than anything I've done before. They started in 2017 after Venus came to me in a dream and said, "You're going to do a Venus retrograde class." Well, since then, my work has deepened and deepened and deepened, but things are really heating up at the end of this month. And Venus actually stations retrograde 2 days after the new moon that we're going to look at. So I will also put a link to this elsewhere, or perhaps share it again at the end of the video. But it's also, if you want to just go and check it out, you can see it's bit.ly/Venus Journey 2023. So it's actually / if you want to look at the website. But moving on, before I talk about all the aspects, I have pulled a card, and I actually pulled one of my favorite cards. And it kind of surprised me because it's a Cancer new moon, which is a water sign. But in a way, it did not surprise me, because this new moon is so tied into the Venus retrograde in Leo. And this is a fire card. This is the Queen of Wands, and this is the mastery of self-knowledge. So I'm actually going to read you a little story about this. Okay, so the Queen of Wands is the knower of the self. This symbol represents self-mastery in the process of self-reclamation. She wears the symbol of Pisces on her chest. You can just see that there. As a symbol of the fluidity and the aspiration that is required to attain self-knowledge, an attribute often given to Piscean people. Her process of transformation and self-actualization is best described by the story she represents of a woman who, before she knew who she was, had black hair and walked with a panther by her side. As she began to discover who she was, her hair turned brown and the panther changed to a leopard. When she fully realized who she was and began to manifest who she was in the world with her pine cone wand, her hair turned fiery red. At this stage of self-knowledge, she pinched the growth marks of the leopard to prevent it from transforming into a beautiful lion to match her self-knowledge, because she wanted a reminder of the dark places from whence she had come. That's the spots of the leopard are the reminder. This myth represents the process of self-discovery and the splendor of awakening to the deepest essence of who we are, which is the radiant crown at the top. However, I will point out this this Venus retrograde that is really kind of launched by this new moon. Well, actually, Venus turns retrograde 5 days after. My first call is 2 days after this new moon, because Leo is about putting on your crown. Leo is about self-love, self-mastery, self-awareness, and stepping into being the queen of your world. But we cannot forget the opposite point, which is Aquarius, which is the people, and not kind of getting too full of yourself. Come on, camera, catch up with the, I'm sorry, I'm foggy at the moment. So while the camera catches up and focuses on me, hopefully, I am going to just mention what aspects this this period is going to bring. Okay, so on 17th of July, as we have the new moon, right after, in fact, the nodes will shift into Aries and Libra, and where they will be for the next 18.5 months, and where all the eclipses are going to be. I'll be doing another video on that, but since that is a rare shift, that is an 18.6 year shift, you can look back at that time and see when the nodes moved into Aries, Libra for you then, and also what area of, oh, come on, camera, why is it not Oh, my camera's acting very weird. Let's see. I might have to start again. This is no good. Oh, there we go. Okay. And then so after we've got the nodal shift happening as the new moon in Cancer is happening, which is what we're going to talk about today. Then on July the 19th, we have our first Venus retrograde call for those attending the class. On the very next day, Mars is in opposition to Saturn. I'll be talking about that in more detail later. Then on 21st of July, the Sun opposes Pluto. 22nd of July, which incidentally is the feast day of Mary Magdalene, Venus stations retrograde. And then we have Leo season beginning the same day as Venus stations retrograde. Then on July the 23rd, Chiron stations retrograde. And then on July the 23rd, also Pluto squares the nodes for the first of 3 times in that last week of July. I talked a little bit about this in my July forecast. Of course, there's always more to say, and I will be doing different videos to drill down on some of these topics and aspects. But just let me tell you that that period from this new moon to the end of July is, wow, is kind of crazy, crazy intense. And then, of course, 2 weeks after the new moon, we have a full moon then as well. So this will take us right from the new moon to the full moon. All right. And the full moon is on August the 1st. So more on that later when I do the podcast for that. But just, oh my goodness, what a time we are going into. So remember this card. Remember that this really is the mastery of self-knowledge that we are going into this period. There's so much that's been kind of moving us towards this point over the last few years. The nodes are going to shift, as I said. The North Node is going to be in Aries, which is I am. So we've been through this major period of shifting values, shifting awarenesses, and it's really now about who are we becoming. It's about really kind of getting into that point of high self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-acceptance too, okay, so that you can look at your astrology, for example, or whatever your form of personal knowledge and growth is, and realizing that you have these innate strengths and weaknesses, and you are who you are, but you can do your best with what you are created with, okay, and how you can work to be your highest self whilst also remembering where you came from. All right, so let's share the chart. I think that would be the best thing right now, because there's so much to say that I'm just like, okay, am I missing anything? So this Cancer new moon is on July the 17th at 2:31 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so I've set it for Eastern time because I have to pick somewhere. So that will be 12:31 Mountain, 11:31 a.m. On the Pacific coast. It will be 7:31 p.m. Universal time, okay, London time. Now this is at 24 Cancer, as I mentioned, so you can see this over here. And this is actually in a cardinal grand cross. Over recent years, we've had a lot of activity in the cardinal signs, which are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Pluto. And we're kind of ending out of that period as more and more of the slower moving bodies move out of cardinal signs. But this is really kind of a big, one of the big last blasts. Okay. Now, one other aspect I didn't mention is that also on July the 28th, we have, it's the fourth exact Pluto Haumea square. I'll link to the article in the show notes, but I wrote an article on this Pluto Haumea square being the aspect of the decade, because those two are going to square each other 13 times they started in May of 2022, and there will be the last and final exact square will be on January the 13th, 2028 at 6 Aquarius and Scorpio, because by then Haumea will be in Scorpio, Pluto will be well settled into Aquarius. Now 6 Aquarius happens to be the south node of the USA now, but even away from that, 6 Aquarius happens to almost be the point where Venus and Mars will next meet next February, after Venus is retrograde and when Venus catches up to Mars. So, you know, we're really at this pivotal point where all these stories are kind of coming together, okay, over this decade. And I really do think, even though the world feels a lot of the time like it's kind of falling apart, it kind of feels like a pivotal point of transformation for something really new, a real rebirth. You might want to call it the age of Aquarius. You might want to, you know, whatever you want to call it, just this new paradigm. And all that's happening is moving us towards that. And this new moon is a big part of it, because look at this square with Pluto, Haumea, and Eris. I know it's not exact, but these are big energies. So this is a big cardinal grand cross, grand square, and cardinal signs are initiators of change. They force change forward. They start new things. They pioneer things. And also in cardinal signs, this is very much kind of about our identity in the world. So we've got all of that happening, okay, on this cardinal T-square. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But I just want to talk about some other things that I'm going to be looking at through this podcast. First, the 0 point. We've just had Sedna move into the sign of Gemini for the first time. Sedna has an 11,406-year orbit. I also did a video about Sedna if you want to check through my videos. And she will be retrograding back into Taurus, but next year will move fully into Gemini. That's a major shift. Okay, she's going to then spend, I think it's 43 years in the sign of Gemini. Sedna's been in Taurus since 1965, bringing us through a lot of other big shifts politically, socially, and so on. If you think about the 60s, it was the start of the civil rights era. At the moment, in the US, we're having a lot of those rights stripped away. But it's my actual belief that this is to ask us to rethink things and make something different rather than the way it's been done in the past, to actually kind of codify equality and so on for the people. But hope I'm right. But anyway, that's Sedna. She's at 0 degrees. Here we have Hecate. Hecate, the goddess Hecate, is the goddess of the crossroads. She's moved to 0 Leo and is going to be Venus' companion for her retrograde, as she was the goddess of the crossroads that accompanied Persephone's mother, Demeter, in finding her daughter. Okay. And so it's like almost like Hecate is coming into Leo as Venus stroke Persephone retrogrades fully in Leo for the first time, to say, let's come together and let's show you your way forward to this mastery of self-knowledge. Okay. And so that's at 0 degrees. And of course, 0 is the alpha, the omega, the infinite potential. And then at the opposite ends of the scale, we have the nodes finishing just minutes, literally minutes after the new moon, from finishing their 18-month journey through the signs of Scorpio and Taurus. And they are saying, what have we learned through that journey since May 2022? And how are, I think it was before that, but anyway, last about 18 months. What have we learned through the last lot of eclipses, the ones in the spring of 2023, the winter of 2022, and the spring of 2022. What have we learned during that period about sustainability? How have our values changed? How have we learned about what we really value? How have we learned more about sharing our resources and also connecting with the natural world? There's a lot more I could say about the nodes, but maybe I'll have to do a separate video just for the nodes because they're so vast. So those 0 points are really important as well, whether just starting at the 0 points or just finishing at the 0 points, because this is an infinite potential. This is the Fool in the tarot. This is taking a leap. This is like starting a new journey. And we are starting a new journey. This new moon to the full moon on August the 1st is just like going, all right, okay, it's time to really activate the changes that you have been building towards. Now, of course, while I'm just on this, we'll come back to the new moon as well. Other aspects I want to point out. Point to Venus, of course. We have a fire grand trine to Eris in Aries. I'm going to say Chiron vaguely as well, remembering that Chiron is going to station retrograde right after this new moon, and to the galactic center. Venus is at her station retrograde degree. She's going to retrograde on July the 22nd, the Magdalene feast day. of course, in a trine to the galactic center. So there's a lot of new information coming in from the galactic center. Eris is pointing out where things are unfair, and Venus is saying it takes self-knowledge and self-mastery and love medicine to really kind of put on your crown and be kind of the benevolent leader and shine your inner light, but do it in a very non-ego attached way. We all have an ego, but not an inflated ego. This is Venus learning to kind of be this benevolent, heart-led leader. One other aspect I will have to talk about, of course, and it's kind of tied into some of the others, because Neptune is it's stationed retrograde on June the 30th in a square to the galactic center, and you can see that they are in this square still and will be for most of the next year and a half. Okay, but Neptune is in a quincunx to Venus as well, and Pluto is in a quincunx to Venus, and that means that they are in a sextile to each other. They are kind of moving a little bit away from each other, but this has been an ongoing sextile for quite some time. But this is pointing this finger of fate or God or Yod right at Venus. Okay. And if you watch my Venus retrograde preview video, you will know that this point was the point of the Great American Eclipse that split the US in two. And if you, just to look at this whole picture, and then I'm going to take this away and stop getting so granular. All of this is happening at the ends and beginnings of signs. Haumea is finishing her journey in Libra, which is a Venusian sign. Pluto is finishing their journey in Capricorn, okay, where Venus last retrograde was, and in December 21 into early 2022, Venus retrograded in Capricorn in a dance with Pluto, and this is kind of finishing up that dance. Honestly, this is one of the most important periods of our lives. I have to tell you that. And then Neptune. Neptune will finish their journey in the sign of Pisces in 2026, but is now soaking up this information from the galactic center, which emits new knowledge, so that we can have this big spiritual upgrade and really kind of create something new that's going to emerge later as Neptune finishes in the sign of Pisces, which really is kind of the amniotic fluid of creation. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. It's kind of where everything goes into chaos, ready for Aries, for the next sign. So what amazing energies we are experiencing. Okay, so that's enough kind of detail that is kind of going to really kind of bury your heads. But remember that I will always be coming back to talk about each of these aspects in more detail and separate them out a little bit. But I wanted you to see just how much there was at the end of the degrees. Each sign has 30 degrees. And so we've got a lot finishing in signs and an awful lot beginning. There's a lot of endings and beginnings, as well as Pluto coming up to square the nodes 3 times. That doesn't happen very often. And I'll do a separate video for that too. But let's hone in to the Cancer new moon. So Cancer's a very really tenacious sign. Okay. It's a very emotional sign as a water sign. When the moon is in Cancer, and this is a full moon in Cancer, and a lot of this happens with some of the other planets when they go through this sign, and Capricorn. The moon is out of bounds, so this is a new moon that is out of bounds, which means that it's far off the ecliptic, and so it's a little bit eccentric. It's acting out of the ordinary. So even though it's a no moon, new moon, in the dark of the moon where we plant seeds, this is plant different seeds. Okay, this is saying it's time to create something different. And Cancer is a very creative sign. It's the sign of mothering. It's the sign of nurturing, of nourishment, of family, of the caretaker, of your clan. Okay. It's also the sign of cooking and food, and the stomach. It's ruled by the crab, and the symbol for the Cancer sign has the pincers kind of hugging itself. So it's very protective, but very comforting. It collects as well. It's quite conservative in a way of wanting to conserve what is good. Cancer is also very gentle and very contemplative, very, very thrifty. There's just so many words I could say about Cancer. And Cancer is the moon's own sign. So even though this is a meeting of the luminaries conjunct together, the sun, which is the very core of our cosmos and our being, and rules the sign of Leo, incidentally, where Venus is stationing retrograde. The moon is really strong in Cancer because it's their home sign. And so this is about affection. This is about empathy. We're going to have our coming on the back of some of the things that have been happening in the world. I think we are really going to be quite over emotional on this new moon, in this no moon phase. We can feel that tense grand cross on the new moon, with Eris kind of going in Aries, kind of going, hey, this isn't fair, but this is revealing what's unfair. Eris pulls down those picket fences. She stands up for the outsiders, but often that has to be revealed before change can come. So, for example, you know, we're finding that there's been revelations about certain ones of our leaders, revealing their lack of integrity, even if what they've done may not be illegal. I'm not a legal scholar, but for example, some of the Supreme Court justices in the US, having kind of like these sugar daddies paying for their big trips, and their relatives' private schooling and things like that. Just this lack of integrity that has been shown to be reflected in how they are ruling in certain legal cases, and just how they're working as well. You know, there's a lot of lack of integrity being shown in so many ways. And it's being revealed in other countries too. You know, I live in the US, so it's right in my face. But you know, you probably know where it's happening in your country. But if we look at this Cancer new moon, everything is extra because the moon is out of bounds. It's very out of bounds at this point, to be quite honest. And again, strong in their own sign, and forming this cardinal grand cross or grand square to some of the big change agents. So I mentioned the square to Eris in Aries, revealing the lack of integrity and fairness in the corridors of our leaders, which is very Aries. And then we have this opposition from the new moon to Pluto, and Pluto diving back into Capricorn, which is the structures of our society, the institutions, and really kind of the moon, the new moon in the dark is staring Pluto in the face as if to say, oh, I can see all these shadows now. All right. And then we have a square to Haumea. Haumea in Libra. Haumea is a beautiful energy. She is pure creation. The goddess Haumea was the Hawaiian goddess of creation. She was the mother of the pantheon of gods and goddesses in Hawaii, the mother of Pele and other deities there as well. She could birth from any part of her body and also just regenerate. She was constantly regenerating. And in the sign of Libra, Haumea is there rebirthing balance, justice, and harmony. But she's working in tandem with all the other energies that I talked about that are revealing the lack of integrity and the lack of justice and the lack of balance and harmony. But she is in Libra there saying, time to really kind of look at this and time to birth something new. So we have a new moon with an out of bounds new moon, an out of bounds moon in their own sign, saying it's time to actually birth something new in a square to Haumea, which is saying birth justice, birth harmony, birth balance, birth togetherness in the sign of Libra. So a couple of other words about Cancer, though. I mentioned empathy and family. It's going to be deeply emotional. It's going to be saying, you know, what can we do now to preserve and protect our family as at a nuclear level, you know, a macro level and the greater family. It's also about history and the ancestors and learning from history. It's also about creating your own personal home and being very your own basis of security. But it's very sentimental, can be very smothering. There may be an attempt, bigger temptation. There we go. That's the word. A big temptation on this new moon to have all these kind of fears kind of emerge to the surface and say, you know, this is horrible. This is horrible. How can I really kind of overly protect and smother what's mine as well, which kind of leads to kind of hoarding and so on. So, you know, just be aware that, you know, this is quite an emotionally challenging new moon leading to a very challenging time in that last period from the new moon to the full moon on August the 1st, where you may be tempted to just go into that kind of hoarding, insecure, sullen is another good word, snappy, smothering kind of energy. But at its highest, this energy is the energy of real, tender, tenacious, but vulnerable creation. It's saying it's time to birth something new on this new moon. What an amazing time. I want to look at the numbers too, actually. So this is a 24-degree Cancer new moon. And the 24 is a number of the family. This is the number of responsibility, faithfulness and sympathy. But again, does have that tendency to interfere too much in others' lives. But 24 is a natural healing energy. And the purpose of 24 is to send out love and to teach others. So that's, you know, the basis of that 24 degree. Now it's made up of numbers 2, numbers 4, and if you add those two together, 2 plus 4, we get a 6. So we've also got 2, 4, 6 on this new moon. And 2 is really the number of the divine feminine. Okay, it's related to the moon in the tarot, and the high priestess as well. But this is the silent knower, the calm, intuitively aware peacemaker, very social, but about our social contracts. The 2 is gentle, kind, charming, which is why it's generally seen as the divine feminine, because 1 is more about action and leadership, but the 2 is very much about harmony, very supportive, very cooperative. So you can see kind of what's coming up in all of this energy. So then luckily we also have the 4, which is really about stability. The 4 is about practicality, organization, and pragmatism. It's also patriotism as well, in its highest sense of the word, and about dignity. In the tarot, it's a number, the 4 cards are always a number of stability, but 4 relates to high morals, traditional values, honesty, and integrity. Now, interpretation of traditional values comes from your perspective, so I won't say too much about that. But the 4 is also related to the Emperor card in the tarot, which is the benevolent leader. So we've got the 4 there as well. So 4 seek security, and the home is their haven. So we're getting this theme about basis of security and home and stability. Okay, but it's also there can be a lack of conviction and the inability to adapt, okay, to the new world. We can see that problem coming up as well. And finally, the number 6. If we add 2 plus 4, this makes a 6. And here we are. Yeah. So the 6 is a really beautiful number. And I am going to mention my Venus retrograde class again, and you'll see why. But 6 connects above and below. 6 is about reconciliation, discrimination, imagination, union, love, and the ability to use the imagination and the intellect together. 6 is a number of relatedness, and is the Lover's card in the tarot, which is the union of all opposites. Now, the number 6 is related to the planets Venus and Uranus. And really, this new moon is kind of launching the Venus retrograde. And the Venus retrograde is in a square to Uranus in Taurus. The midpoint of the retrograde, called the Venus star point, that we'll be looking at in much more detail in my class, is in a square to the planet Uranus. And so we are awakening, really, if we choose to accept this mission, so to speak. We are really being asked to step into this Queen of Wands energy, to awaken to it, to awaken our crown, but never to forget where we came from. And that's where the kind of empathy and so on comes in. Oh, this is just off the charts, to be quite honest. So a little more just about some of the other energies. I've talked about the degrees. I've talked about Neptune and the square to the galactic center, and all of this activating all of these last degrees. You know, we have Neptune at 27 degrees, Eris at 25. I'm going to say all those last 5 degrees of many signs, with the new moon being almost at 25 degrees. We've got Neptune at 27 degrees still. We have Venus and Haumea at 28 degrees. We have the galactic center at 27 degrees and Pluto at 29. All these are speaking to each other in so many ways. But I do want to talk about this finger of fate or God. Pluto in Capricorn is has been revealing the lack of integrity in our structures of our lives, and that's in our own personal lives, as well as talking about the institutions of, you know, law and courts and government and banking and so on. Pluto has been revealing all kinds of cracks in the system since 2008. And Pluto will finish the journey in Capricorn next year. But right now it's pointing at Venus again. But Pluto is in that sextile to Neptune, which is in the square to the galactic center. To my mind, it feels like this energy of becoming that Queen of Wands energy, to putting on your crown, to opening your heart, to finding your love medicine is where it's at, to become a more benevolent and a more loving world. And it starts with personal self-knowledge and understanding and acceptance. It's you probably think, oh, she's only doing this to talk about her Venus retrograde class, but honestly, it's so integral to this. It's so important. So whilst I'm on this finger of fate and finger of God pointing at Venus, I mentioned Neptune is in the square to the galactic center, learning this new information. I think new belief systems and new kind of higher state of faith and consciousness is being called upon over the next few months. But also, where was I going with that one? Yes. I mentioned briefly that right after this new moon, Pluto is going to square the nodes. And to get to that, let me give you those days. Okay, Pluto. I should have had them written down, but it's fine. Pluto, oh, not a trine, no. Bear with me 1 second. So yeah, Pluto will square the nodes for the first time on July the 23rd, after the nodes have moved back into Aries and Libra. And then, so that's July the 23rd, early on July the 23rd. So it'll be July the 22nd, the day Venus turns retrograde for some of us. July the 25th, Pluto will square the nodes. And then July the 28th, Pluto will square the nodes. Now, this is something that happens really rarely. Okay, I'm probably again going to do a separate video for that, but just to talk about this, Pluto last squared the North Node back in 2015. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not rare, but it doesn't happen every year. Pluto was in Capricorn in January of 2015 and squared the nodes while the nodes were in Aries and Libra back then. But at that time, the North Node was in Libra. And we were learning about unfairness and learning about lack of balance and learning about our part in this. Again, so much more I could say about that. But at that point, Pluto was at 13 degrees of Capricorn. So think back to then. And then that was just one square. Before that, Pluto squared the nodes back in 2006. So 2015, you can kind of get the idea that this is about every 9 years Pluto squares the nodes, because they kind of move towards each other at all times. That one in 2006, Pluto was at 24 Sagittarius, conjunct the galactic center. Okay, I will do a further video about that, but the North Node was in Pisces at that time, back in 2006, very close to where Neptune is right now. So we're kind of getting activations of these last times. So a square to the nodes is a tipping point. It's called the moon wobble, because they are the moon's nodes. It's also called the bendings. It's also called a skip step in natal astrology or in evolutionary astrology. But it is a turning point, and it often is a turning point that brings immense moments of kind of crisis a little bit as well, especially with Pluto. I haven't gone and looked back at the history of the squares to the nodes yet, because I'm going to do a separate video on it. But please know that those 3 squares to the nodes right after this new moon are just huge, really important. So again, the first one is on July the 23rd, overnight, at 22nd, 23rd, depending where you are. It coincides with Venus going retrograde. Then the Pluto squares the nodes again just 2 days later due to retrograde motion at on July the 25th. And all of this is occurring at 29 degrees, the first 2 anyway. And then the last square on July the 28th, Pluto will square the nodes at 28 degrees and 58 minutes of Capricorn and Aries. New beginnings are coming. So my point is that this period is crazy. It's kind of intense. There's more I could say about it. There's more aspects, but just to focus in on this out of bounds new moon on July the 17th, which incidentally is a 7 month in a 7 year. The 7 is very much kind of tower card energy. It's about destruction and rebirth. And it's a very spiritual number, but it's often about kind of this spiritual crisis before something new is coming. But it's also on the 17th, which is 1 new beginnings, 7, another 7 there, but that makes an 8, which is infinity and stability and abundance. And you know, Leo as well, with Venus stationing retrograde, really right on this new moon, 5 days after. But as the moon's starting to gain light, Venus will station retrograde in that finger of fate, finger of God, right after the new moon. This is really kind of about creating real joy, love medicine, bliss, nurturing abundance, but it's not going to be easy. This is kind of a tough new moon, to be quite honest. I do have to say it's got huge potential, but tough. So anything else I want to say? Well, I do want to say, of course, that the new moon is at 24 degrees 56 minutes of Cancer. So it's almost 25. I'm going to say if you have anything around that degree of the cardinal signs, you're going to be really affected by this one. That is Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. But because of so much else going on around this new moon, if you have any placements, and by that I mean sun, moon, planets, or rising sign, or midheaven, or any of the angles opposite the rising sign, of course, would be the same degree, and so would opposite the midheaven, you are going to really feel this new moon. But we are going to feel this collectively. It's a really, to go back just to the numbers, the number 24, this is about being given an opportunity to create balance, to be disciplined and patient, to create from love, to create from honor, but to be very practical in the way that you do it as well. Okay. So lean into it. It's we're not going to forget that this period between this Cancer new moon and to the August the 1st full moon, which, let me tell you a little bit about that, even though I'll be doing another podcast for the full moon nearer the time. That will be an Aquarius new moon, full moon, with the sun in Leo, their own sign. That is kind of going to reach a peak of fulfillment, and I will look at that in greater detail closer to the time, but just a quick glimpse of it for myself. That full moon is square to Jupiter, so it's going to provide huge impetus for growth. It's square to Jupiter in Taurus. More to say about that later on. It's in a lovely trine aspect to Ceres in Libra. There's huge potential for that full moon, but you're going to have to really lean in and not kind of give in to the fears of the unknown, because it's a very vulnerable no moon phase with the moon out of bounds, and not to kind of what's the best way to describe this? Not to really take on, because Cancer and then it being a no moon is a very is a watery empathic sign. So to kind of pull those pincers in a little bit, but not into the way of blocking out the world, but protecting yourself and letting what's happening in the outer world kind of bounce off you a little bit, and focusing on mastering your own self-knowledge, your own personal growth, and birthing your new world. So let's move to the symbols, okay? But before I do, a reminder about my Venus class again. You're like, I know. But honestly, I love this class, and it's so transformational, and I really hope you'll consider joining me. But also check out my mugs and t-shirts below. But I want to read you the symbols for this new moon. The Sabian symbol, dark shadow or mantle thrown suddenly over the right shoulder. When we align, I'm reading from jamesburgess.com. I like his interpretations of the Sabian symbols. So this is about enacting the soul's purpose. When we align worldly aims with the soul's essence vibration, we feel as though we have been blessed by divine dispensation, feeling the occasional rush of spiritual empowerment. And then he goes on to say, true success is an endowment. It may feel as though one is blessed by higher forces to carry out special cosmic purposes, but in truth, the benefactor of this endowment is our higher self. which is accessed whenever all sides of personality are mastered and brought into harmony. The inevitable outcome of this process is that we become influential over those who have imbalances. So we are then able and inclined to guide those around us towards the realization of a higher purpose. And Rudyard's wording of that symbol was a willful human is overshadowed by a descent of superior power. Spirit, in other words. So just wow. You can look it up on jamesburgess.com if you want. But this really is speaking again to the Queen of Wands. And, you know, I think it's appropriate that even though a lot of these symbols are written from speaking of man and men and he, this is a time of the rise of the divine feminine to be in balance with the divine masculine. So I love that I pulled the Queen. But anyway, let's look at the Chandra symbol for Cancer 25. A flock of penguins on an icy beach. Inward purpose draws to itself an invisible community of those who are dedicated to the far places together. Your subtle support system recognizes acutely that you are bearing gifts of a high and free kind and attempting to bring these through in just the right way. A guiding stream accompanies your very life pulse and steers you towards staying faithful and not pushing too hard too fast. A timeless, future-infused sphere, vast and expansive and truly unlimited. Become the personification of this otherness by being inwardly there within it and outwardly silent and poised and cool. There shall be chances, opportunities, ritual occasions for bringing the greater worlds to bear upon the basic shared life stream. And at all other times, preparation and ripening are in order to be perfectly ready when called upon, clear, steady, and super true. Now, I'm just going to, that was Elias Lonsdale's interpretation of the Chandra symbols. The Chandra symbols were actually channeled by John Sandbach. And I just want to quickly read what he says about this one too. He says that penguins are denizens in a hostile world, but they have survival skills, will adapted to their environment. There is a yearning to be more real, to become visible, to connect with our spiritual purpose. We can do this, and when we do it, we find we are in harmony with the world around us, and also find ourselves with companions with whom we may share mutual support. We found our clan, in other words. I actually love the word clan for this. So that's my kind of thoughts on this new moon that is just the 2 weeks after this new moon is crazy, and the new moon itself is pretty crazy. But you know, there is support. You can come, you can just follow my Substack, my daily posts. I post the link to that on my Cosmic Owl Astrology Facebook page. My Venus retrograde class, I promise, will be a great support for those who feel called to it. We are going to do all kinds of shamanic healing work, as well, of course, as looking at the astrology. I'm going to talk about myth, and I've got a special tarot deck that I'll be using for the class. I keep adding more to my slides. This is just going to so it's such an important time for so many reasons. You can also find the Venus retrograde preview video that I made if you kind of want to know a bit more about it before deciding. I'll put the link to sign up, and I'll also share this QR code again while I talk about other things. I also want to say that I will post those symbols in the description. Okay. The Chandra symbols and the Sabian symbols. I will also, there was something else I was going to post in there. Obviously, the link to my Venus class. Nope. Check the description out anyway. I know a lot of people just tend to kind of listen to these videos and not read the whole description, but there's going to be some information in that description, including the symbols, not just the class registration. Is that it? No, there was something else. But anyway, I also want you to see, just for a bit of kind of inspiration, I guess, this beautiful picture. My calendar, I've mentioned it before, is created by the wonderful artist She Who Is. You can find her on Etsy and Facebook. I think she's on Instagram too. I now buy her calendar every year. This image is really just, I actually don't even know what this bit of art is for her. I might have to look into it. But look at this. It looks like wings. It looks like birthing. It looks like the goddess rising. I'm not an affiliate. I don't get any money for selling her work, but to go and check her out, because this calendar, this image feels like it can support us through this last 2 weeks of July and into August, when we actually get to the point of going, what just happened? And now what do I do with it? All right, my loves, I will see you on the next video. And don't forget to subscribe, check out my merch, all those fun things, and leave me a comment, leave me a thumbs up.